HighBridge, a division of recorded books, presents The Improbability of Love, a novel by Hannah Rothschild, read by Adam James and Kristin Atherton.
For Nell, Clemency, and Rose. Prologue. The Auction. 3rd of July. It was going to be the sale of the century. From first light, a crowd had started gathering, and by the late afternoon it stretched from the monumental grey portico of the auction house, Monocorum and Sons, established 1756, across the wide pavement and out into Horton Street. At noon, metal barriers were erected to keep a central walkway clear, and at 4 p.m, 2 uniformed Monocorum doormen rolled out a thick red carpet from the fluted Doric columns all the way to the edge of the pavement. The sun beat down on the crowd, and the auction house, as a gesture of goodwill, handed out free bottles of water and ice lollies. As Big Ben struck 6 mournful chimes, the police diverted normal traffic and sent 2 mounted officers and 8 on foot to patrol the street. The paparazzi, carrying stepladders, laptops, and assorted lenses, were corralled into a small pen to one side, where they peered longingly through the door at 3 television crews and various accredited journalists who had managed to secure passes to cover the event from inside. "What's going on?" a passerby asked a member of the crowd.
"They're selling that picture, the one on the news,"
explained Felicia Spears, who had been there since breakfast.
"The impossibility of love." "The improbability of love," corrected her friend, Dawn Morlows. "Improbability," she repeated, rolling the syllables slowly over her tongue. "Whatever, everyone knows what I'm talking about," said Felicia, laughing. "Are they expecting trouble?" asked the passerby, looking from the police horses to the auction house's burly security guards. "Not trouble, just everyone who's anyone," said Dawn, holding up her smartphone and an autograph book that had the words "Rock and Royalty" embossed in gold lettering across the front. "All this hullabaloo for a picture?" asked the passerby. "It's not just any old artwork, is it?" said Felicia. "You must have read about it." At the top of the broad steps of Monocorum, 4 young women in black dresses and high-heeled shoes stood holding tablets waiting to check off names. This was an invitation-only event. From certain vantage points, the crowd outside could just glimpse the magnificent interiors. Formerly the London seat of the Dukes of Dartmouth, Monocorum's building was one of Europe's grandest surviving Palladian palaces. Its hallway was large enough to park 2 double-decker buses side by side. The plaster ceiling, a riot of putty and pulchritudinous mermaids, was painted in pinks and golds. An enormous staircase, wide enough for 8 horsemen to ride abreast, took the visitor upstairs to the grand sale room, an atrium, its walls lined with white and green marble and top-lit by 3 rotunda. It was, in many ways, quite unsuitable for hanging and displaying works of art. It did, nevertheless, create a perfect storm of awe and desire. In a side room, 24 impeccably turned-out young men and women were being given their final instructions. Luckily, on this hottest of nights, the air conditioning kept the room a steady 18 degrees. The chief auctioneer and mastermind of the sale, Earl Beechenden, dressed for the evening in black tie, stood before them. He spoke firmly and quietly, in a voice honed by 8 generations of aristocratic fine living and assumed superiority. Beechenden had been educated at Eton and Oxford, but, owing to his father's penchant for the roulette table,
The 8th Earl was the first member of his illustrious family to have sought regular employment. Earl Beechenden appraised his team. For the past 4 weeks they had rehearsed, anticipating all eventualities from a broken heel to an attempted assassination. With the world's media in attendance and many of the auction house's most important clients gathered in one place, it was essential that events were managed with the precision of a finely tuned Swiss clock. This evening was a game-changer in the history of the art market. Everyone expected the world record for a single painting to be smashed.
The attention of the world's media is on us,
Beechenden told his rapt audience.
Hundreds of thousands of pairs of eyes will be watching. One small mistake will turn triumph into disaster. This is not just about Monocorum, our bonuses, or the sale of one painting. This event will reflect on an industry worth over $100 billion annually, and our handling of this evening will reverberate across time and continents. I don't need to remind you that this is an international arena. It's time that our contribution to the wealth and health of nations is recognized.
No pressure, my lord, someone quipped. Earl Beechenden ignored his minion.
According to our extensive research, your respective charges will be the highest bidders. It is up to each of you to nurture, cajole, and encourage them to go that little bit further. Convince them that greatness lies in acquisition. Excite their curiosity and competitive urges. Use every weapon in your arsenal. Bathe them in a sea of perfectly judged unctuousness. Remind each of them how unique, how talented, how rich they are, and most importantly, that it is only here, at this house, that their brilliant eye and exquisite taste are appreciated and understood. For one night, forget friendship and morals. Concentrate only on winning.
Beechenden looked along the line of faces, all flushed with excitement.
You are each to make your assigned guests feel special. Special with a capital S. Even if they don't succeed in buying what they are after, I want these ultra-high net worthers to leave this evening longing to come back, desperate to win the next round. No one must feel like a loser or an also-ran. Everyone must feel that some tiny thing conspired against them, but next time they will triumph.
Beechenden walked up the line of employees, looking from one to another. For them, the evening was an exciting experience, with a potential bonus. For him, it boiled down to penury and pride.
Now, remember, particularly the ladies, you are expected to serve and delight. I leave the interpretation of serve and delight entirely up to each of you, but discretion is the name of the game.
Nervous laughter rippled through the ranks.
As I read out the names of the guests, I would like their minders to step forward. You should all be familiar with your charge's appearance, likes, dislikes, and peccadillos.
Beechenden paused before offering his well-practiced, deliberately politically incorrect joke.
No offering alcohol to Muslims or ham sandwiches to Jews.
His audience laughed obediently.
Who is looking after Vlad Antipovsky and Dmitry Voldakov?
2 young women, one in tight-fitting black taffeta, the other in a backless green silk dress, raised their hands.
Venetia and Flora, remember, given the chance, these 2 men will rip each other's throats out. We have managed to keep their personal security to a minimum and have asked them to leave their firearms at home. Prevention is our best policy. Keep them apart. Understood?
Venetia and Flora nodded. Consulting his list, Beechenden read out the next names.
Their Royal Highnesses, the Emir and Sheikha of Al-Wabi.
Tabitha Rowley Hutchinson, the most senior member of guest relations, was encased in royal blue satin. Only her long neck and slender wrists were visible.
Tabitha, what subjects will you avoid at all costs?
I will not mention Al-Wabi's supposed support for Al-Qaeda, the Emir's other wives, or the country's human rights record.
Li Han Ta, are you fully briefed on Mr. Li Len Fok?
Li Han Ta nodded gravely.
Remember, the Chinese may not triumph today, but they are the future.
Looking around the room, he saw that every single person was in agreement.
Who is in charge of His Excellency, the President of France?
Marie de Nancy was wearing a blue silk tuxedo and matching trousers. I will ask him about cheese, his First Lady, and French painting, but I won't mention another British victory in the Tour de France, his mistress, or his popularity ratings, she said. Beechenden nodded.
Who is managing the Right Honourable Barnaby Damson, Minister of Culture?
A young man hopped forward. He was wearing a pink velvet suit, and his hair was coiffed in a style once known as a duck's arse. Beechenden groaned.
More subtlety, please. The minister might be of that persuasion, but he doesn't like to be reminded in public.
I thought I might talk about the ballet. He loves the ballet.
Stick to football and cinema,
Beechenden instructed.
Who is looking after Mr. M. Power Dubbox?
In recent months, the world's most successful rapper had surprised the art world by buying several iconic works of art. Standing at nearly 7 foot tall, weighing 250 pounds, and flanked by an entourage of black-suited minders and nearly naked women, Mr. M. Power Dubbox was unmissable, and apparently unbiddable. His behaviour, fueled by various substances and pumped up by infamy, frequently led to arrests, but, as yet, no convictions. 2 large men in black tie stepped forward. Vasily was a former Russian middleweight boxing champion, and Elmore was an ex-Harvard sports scholar. Looking at the towering men, Beechenden offered a silent thank you to human resources for hiring these colossi in a world populated by fine-boned aesthetes.
Moving on. Who is minding Stevie Brent?
Beechenden asked. Dottie Fairclough Hawes was dressed as an American cheerleader in a tiny striped skirt and bralette.
This is not the baseball finals,
Beechenden snapped.
It might make him feel at home,
said Dottie.
He's a hedge fund manager trying to create a smokescreen around significant recent losses. The last thing he needs is a demented Boston Red Sox fan drawing attention to the fact that he can't afford this picture. Dottie, you are the only person here whose mission it is not to let Stevie Brent buy. According to our sources, he has negative equity of $4 billion. I don't care if he sticks his arm up at the beginning, but sit on his paddle when the bidding gets above £200 million.
Dottie left to locate her blue taffeta ball gown.
Oh, and Dottie, Beechenden called after her. Don't offer him Coca-Cola. He shorted the stock far too soon. It's up 18%.
Earl Beechenden continued through his list of VIPs, making sure that each was linked to an appropriate minder.
Mrs. Appledore, thank you, Celine. The Earl and Countess of Ragston, thank you, John. Mr. and Mrs. Hercules Christantopoulos, thank you, Sally. Mr. and Mrs. Mahmood, Lucy, very good. Mr. and Mrs. Elliot Slicer IV, well done, Rod. Mr. Lee Hong Kweo So, thank you, bye. Mr. and Mrs. Bastry, thank you, Tam.
Venetia Trumpington-Turner raised her hand.
Who would be looking after the vendors?
That important and delicate job falls to our chairman,"
replied Earl Beechenden. Everyone nodded sagely.
"The rest of you are to make sure that the lesser mortals are in the correct place,"
Earl Beechenden continued.
"The directors of the world's museums are in row H. The editors of the newspapers are in I. The rest of the press are not allowed out of their pen apart from a few named journalists. Camilla has their details. The other high net worthers are to go in J, K, L, and M. Top dealers in rows P and Q. I want the odd model and actress scattered in between the others just to add a bit of sparkle, but no one over the age of 40 or a dress size 8 is worthy of an upgrade. Any celebrity who is not an A-lister can stand."
Beechenden stood tall and looked around.
"Girls, go and reapply your lip gloss. Boys, straighten your ties and line up by the entrance. Do your best."
Mrs. Appledore's limousine was making slow progress. The drive from Claridge's to Horton Street normally took 10 minutes, but there were roadworks and diversions in place, and traffic had slowed to a crawl around Berkeley Square. It was an unusually warm July evening. Londoners, convinced that this was the first and last glimpse of sun, spilled out of pubs and onto pavements. Men took off their jackets, revealing dark, damp patches under their arms, while women wore sundresses showing off pink, prawn-like arms and legs. At least they looked reasonably cheerful for once, Mrs. Appledore thought. The British are so dreary and taciturn during winter. As her car crept up Berkeley Street, she wondered if this would be her last great sale. She was 80 next year, and her annual trip to the London auctions was losing its sheen. Once, she knew everyone in the sale room. More importantly, everyone knew her. Mrs. Appledore kept her eyes fixed on the future, but aspired to the manners and modus operandi of the past. She was born Ina Pawlikowski in Poland in 1935, and her father was murdered by Soviet troops in the Katyn forest massacre. Her mother died shortly afterwards of typhus. Cared for by nuns for the rest of the war, the young Ina was then sent, with 3,000 fellow orphans, to America in 1948. She met her future husband, Janitz, on the refugee boat, the Cargo of Hope, and although they were only 13 years old, he proposed as they passed the Statue of Liberty. She promised to bear him 6 children. She carried 9. And he vowed to make them both millionaires. His estate, when he died in 1990, was valued at $6 billion. On the day of their marriage in 1951, Ina and Janitz changed their names to Melanie and Horace Appledore, and never again uttered a word of Polish. Their first business, started the day after their wedding, was a hire company that rented suits and shoes to impoverished immigrants needing to look smart for job interviews. Soon Appledore Inc. expanded into properties, sweatshops, and then private equity. Knowing from personal experience that immigrants worked far harder than natives, the Appledores provided seed funding for startups in return for a slice of the equity, plus interest on capital. Thanks to the Displaced Persons Act, wave after wave of immigrants arrived on American shores, and the Appledores helped and fleeced Europeans, Mexicans, Koreans, West Indians, and Vietnamese. By the turn of the new century, Melanie and Horace owned small but significant and highly profitable stakes in family businesses across all 50 states. Melanie understood that money alone did not guarantee a seat at the top table. Determined to make her mark on the upper echelons of Park Avenue society, she knew she needed to learn about standards and expectations in order to be part of a seamless flow of gentility and accepted behavior. To this end, she employed Nobel Prize winners, museum directors, and society ladies fallen on hard times to teach her every subject that would help her progress. She learned how to arrange silver at a table, about grape varieties, artistic movements, the difference between allegro and staccato, the amount to tip a duke's butler, which way to turn at dinner, and the direction of travel for a bottle of port. This new generation, Mrs. Appledore thought wistfully, parade their vulgarity like a badge of honour. Horace and Melanie gave to many cultural institutes. They supported the rebuilding of La Fenice in Venice and the restoration of a tiny church in Aix-en-Provence. However, their principal love was a mansion built by the industrialist Lawrence D. Smith in 1924 as a token of love for his French wife, Pipette. Located on the banks of the Hudson River, 45 miles north of Manhattan, it had a 300-foot-long facade and a floor space of nearly 3 acres. Unfortunately, Pipette died just after the house was finished, and the broken-hearted billionaire never moved in. It remained empty and unloved until Horace and Melanie bought it in 1978 for the princely sum of $100. The Smith House was renamed the Appledore Museum of French Decorative Arts. Horace and Melanie spent the next decades and the lion's share of their fabulous fortune restoring the building and creating one of the greatest collections of French furniture and works of art outside Europe. For them, having matter made them feel they did matter. Now in her 80th year, with a weak heart and a bad case of osteoporosis, Mrs. Appledore had decided to blow every last cent in her charitable foundation on the improbability of love. She didn't care if that cleaned it out. She was almost dead anyway, and her children were already provided for. Mrs. Appledore's Chanel dress, made in a lime green silk, a shade almost identical to the foliage in The Improbability of Love, was chosen by her and Karl Lagerfeld to complement the painting. The outfit was completed with a simple diamond necklace and ear clips. Nothing should distract from her last great purchase. That morning, she had asked for a new permanent wave, with a slightly looser curl and a blush of pink. She wanted to look perfect at the moment of her last hurrah. This time tomorrow, every paper would carry a picture of the painting and its new owner. At a press conference, she would announce the immediate donation of her personal collection, complete with The Improbability of Love, to her beloved Appledore Museum. If only her dear late husband had been around to see this final masterstroke. Sitting at his computer in his new house in Chester Square, Vladimir Antipovsky punched in 17 different codes, placed his eye against the iris reader, ran his fingerprints through the ultraviolet scanner, and transferred $500 million into his current account. He was prepared to risk more than money to acquire the work. The Emir of Al-Wabi sat in his bulletproof car outside London's Dorchester Hotel, waiting for his wife, the sheikha Midora, to join him. The auction was the Emir's idea of torture. A private man, he had spent a lifetime avoiding the flash of a camera, the peer and sneer of a journalist, indeed, any kind of life on a public stage. The only exception was when his horse, Fighting Spirit, won the Derby, and on that glorious day, the summation of a lifetime's dream. The Emir could not resist stepping up before Her Majesty the Queen to accept the magnificent trophy on behalf of his tiny principality. It pained the Emir that so few understood that all thoroughbreds were descended from 4 Arabian horses. The English in particular liked to think that through some strange alchemy of good breeding and natural selection, these magnificent animals had somehow morphed out of their squat, bow-legged, shaggy-haired moorland ponies. The Emir wanted to build a museum dedicated to the horse in his landlocked country. His family's livelihood had, for many centuries, relied on the camel and the Arab horse. Oil had only been discovered in the last 30 years. But his wife said no one would visit that kind of place. Only art had the power to persuade people to travel. She pointed to the success of neighbouring projects in Qatar and Dubai, to the transformation of nowhere towns such as Bilbao and Hobart. When those arguments failed to impress her husband, the sheikha raged that it would take less than 1 week's output of crude oil to build the biggest museum in the world. The Emir gave in. Her museum was built. It was universally agreed to be the masterpiece by the world's leading architect, a temple to civilization and a monument to art. However, there was one fundamental problem that neither the sheikha nor her legions of advisors, designers, and even her celebrated architect had anticipated. The museum had nothing in it. Visitors would wander around the cavernous white spaces, marvelling at the shadow lines, the perfect temperature controls, the cool marble floors, the ingenious lighting. But there was little to break the monotony of the endless white walls. It was artless. 4 floors above her husband, in the royal suite, the sheikha sat at her dressing table. Betrothed at 9, married at 13, mother of 4 by the time she was 20, the sheikha was now 42 years old. As the mother of the crown prince, her future was assured. There was little that her husband or courtiers could do to rein in her spending. They could only watch as she scooped up the best from the world's auction rooms and drove prices to new heights. The sheikha needed a star turn, but unfortunately most of the great works were already in national museums or private collections. The moment she saw the improbability of love, she knew that it was the jewel for her museum's crown. Here was a picture capable of drawing tourists from the world over. Unlike those who wanted to buy the painting for a reasonable price, the sheikha wanted the bidding to go wildly out of control. She wanted her picture, she had made that assumption a long time before, to be the most expensive ever bought at auction. The more publicity, the better. While her husband won horse races, she would triumph in the great gladiatorial arena of the auction room. The image of the sheikha fighting for her picture would flash onto every screen all over the world. After a long and bitter battle, the rulers of Al-Wabi would snatch victory from the claws of the world's wealthiest and most avaricious collectors. It would be the final endorsement of her dream, and the ultimate advertisement. Sitting in her hotel suite, the sheikha drew a last line of kohl around her beautiful dark eyes. She clapped her hands together, and 7 ladies-in-waiting appeared, each carrying a haute couture dress. The sheikha wore only a tiny percentage of the clothes made for her, but she liked to have options. Tonight, she looked at the dresses, the Elie Saab, McQueen, Balenciaga, Chanel, and De La Renta, but after some deliberation, she decided to wear a new gown by Versace, made from black silk and real gold thread edged in solid gold coins that chimed gently as she walked. The dress would be hidden by a long black abaya, but at least her Manolo Blahnik booties would be visible. Mink-lined, white kid leather, with 24-carat diamond-studded heels that would flash in the photographer's bulbs as she stepped up to the podium to inspect her latest and greatest acquisition. In another corner of London, in her one-bedroom stock...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?